I remember the sterile hum of fluorescent lights as I sat in the hospital waiting room, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain it would breach my ribs and echo through the corridors. My name is Celeste Marlowe, and a few weeks ago I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition that could be managed, but not cured, if I could afford the treatment. My parents, the people who raised me, the people whose hands I once held to steady their trembling as they comforted me as a child, flatly refused to help with a single penny. I paced the narrow row of plastic chairs, legs restless, mind racing through possibilities I never wanted to consider. I thought of my childhood, of summer mornings in our small house in Lexington, Kentucky, the smell of cinnamon rolls baking, the sound of Dad's off-key singing as he made coffee. I thought of Mom's gentle hands braiding my hair, her soft lullabies that carried me to sleep. But that was another life, one where parents still saw me as their little girl, not as a burden draining their bank account. When the doctor delivered the news, "Celeste, the medication will cost $5,000 a month," my stomach nodded. I swallowed hard, glancing toward the closed door where my parents sat in silent judgment. They exchanged a look that felt colder than winter wind. They had never been wealthy, working-class folks who scrimped and scrapped to keep the household afloat. But I'd been their daughter. Wasn't that enough? Didn't our love count for anything? I forced a smile and turned to them. "Mom, Dad, I need your help. I can't do this alone." My father's jaw clenched. He looked at my mother, then back at me. "Celeste, we've told you before, this family's done what it can. We have our own expenses to handle. It's not fair to expect us to bail you out for something you brought on yourself. You should have taken better care of yourself when you were younger." I blinked, stunned. Brought on myself? How could anyone blame a genetic illness on poor choices? I wanted to scream, to grab him by the collar, but tears stung my eyes. My mother didn't protest. Her tight lips betrayed nothing but disappointment. I left the hospital that day with nothing but a prescription and a heavy sense of betrayal. That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, staring at the cramped kitchen counter littered with bills. My wrist throbbed where I'd been pinched during a panic attack earlier. I'd called every insurance provider, every charity, every program I could find. No help. Every door slammed shut. But I refused to believe that was the end of my story. Over the next few days, I scoured job boards, applying for positions that promised health benefits. I picked up shifts at the cafe downtown, bleary-eyed and trembling, as I forced a smile at customers who thought my exhaustion was just part of a busy student's life. I sold heirlooms from my drawer, my grandmother's brooch, my kindergarten artwork, to cover rent. I felt hollow, as though I was selling pieces of my own history just to survive. Then, late one night, an email pinged in my inbox. The subject line read, "Interview request, executive assistant position." It was from a private investment firm in Manhattan. The pay was astronomical, the benefits even better. It felt too good to be true. I applied, crafting my cover letter in a feverish rush, highlighting every challenge I'd overcome. I submitted my resume and collapsed on my bed, hope and doubt waging a war inside me. A day later, I found myself on a video call with Mrs. Adrienne Stanton, the firm's founder and CEO. Her presence on the screen was electric, poised, intelligent, with eyes that saw straight through pretenses. She asked pointed questions about my background, my resilience, my drive. I spoke of the disease, of my parents' refusal, of how I'd clawed through hardship. "I like your honesty," she said, leaning closer, the glow of her desk lamp framing her face. "And I like your grit. We start next Monday." My heart thundered. Could this be the break I needed? The chance to not only pay for my treatment, but to build something lasting? I hung up the call, breathless, tears of relief mingling with the ones of frustration from earlier. I spent the weekend preparing, finding a modest but professional outfit, mapping out the subway route, rehearsing my elevator pitch. On Monday morning, I stood in front of the Stanton and Company building, its black glass facade towering above me like a monolith of opportunity. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby was silent except for the soft click of my heels on polished marble. A receptionist directed me to the private elevator. As the doors closed, I felt a sudden tightening in my chest. Not fear, exactly, but anticipation so sharp it felt like a blade. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open to reveal a hallway lined with abstract art, strokes of red and gold that seemed to pulse with energy. A brass plaque read, Adrienne Stanton, founder and CEO. My hand trembled as I knocked on the door. Inside, the office was sparsely decorated, yet exuded elegance. Stanton sat behind a minimalist desk. She looked up, her lips curling into a small smile. I approached and extended my hand. She took it firmly. "Welcome aboard, Celeste." As I settled into my new role, the world felt both thrilling and terrifying. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I organized her schedule, drafted replies to high-profile clients, coordinated international calls. Every task completed was a step closer to affording my medication. Every compliment from Stanton was a hammered chisel, sculpting my confidence. But success always comes with risks. Late one evening, after a grueling 12-hour day, I returned to my apartment to find a thick, cream-colored envelope waiting on my doorstep. No return address. My name, handwritten in looping script. I tore it open and unfolded a single sheet of paper. The message was chilling in its brevity. Stay out of Stanton's business, or we'll see you in the emergency room for more than she can cure. My breath caught in my throat. My parents' faces flashed before my eyes. Did they send this? But this threat felt different, colder. Someone was watching me. Someone who didn't want me to succeed. A knock at my door jolted me from my thoughts. I hesitated, then opened it. There stood a courier, an oversized bouquet of white lilies in his arms. No card, no note, just those fragrant flowers that hovered like a balm and a warning. I brought them inside, touched a petal, and felt a prick of dread in my chest. What had I gotten myself into? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The first rays of dawn slipped through my blinds like curious fingers, stirring me from a fitful sleep. My mind replayed the events of the previous night, Stanton's warning flowers, the anonymous threat, and the ache of fear that settled in my chest heavier than any diagnosis. I forced myself out of bed, as though movement could purge the dread, and peered at my reflection in the cracked mirror. Dark circles framed my eyes. I looked exhausted, but alive and determined. Coffee was my only friend as I reviewed the morning's agenda on my phone. A 9 a.m. conference call with a London investor, drafting a pitch deck for a potential merger, and sorting through Stanton's personal correspondence, some of the most sensitive information I'd ever handled. Every document I touched, every email I drafted, brought me closer to affording my treatment. And yet, with every step forward in the office, the shadows at my door grew longer. I arrived at Stanton & Company an hour early, desperate for reassurance in the building's familiar corridors. The elevator doors opened to a gleaming floor that felt colder this morning. I ran a hand along the polished railing, grounding myself. The office doors swung open before I could knock. Adrienne Stanton herself beckoned me inside. "Celeste," she said, her voice a low hum that vibrated through the air. "I trust you got the flowers." I nodded, placing the bouquet on a side table. "Yes, ma'am, I should have come straight to you." Her dark eyes softened for the briefest moment. "You did the right thing by not ignoring them, but we can't let fear dictate our moves. Today, we outmaneuver them." I sat across from her sleek desk, heart pounding. "Who are they?" She hesitated, selecting her words. "There are people who don't want us to expand into Asia. Stanton & Company has the capital and the expertise to reshape the market, but there's entrenched opposition, individuals connected to a rival firm. They're powerful. And they're ruthless." I swallowed. "But why threaten me?" Stanton's gaze locked onto mine. "Because you're a threat too. You're the linchpin. If you falter, they think the entire operation collapses." My palms grew sweaty. "I won't let that happen." She leaned back, steepling her fingers. "Good. That's why I hired you." The London investors' call began punctually at 9. I adjusted my headset, glad to escape the tension in Stanton's office. Across time zones, we discussed market data, projections, and risk assessments. I fielded questions, improvised answers, and guided the conversation back to profitable opportunities. When we signed off, the investors' enthusiastic looking forward to working with Stanton and Company still echoed in my mind. But success often invites new battles. At noon, I escorted Stanton to a luncheon at an upscale hotel near Central Park. As we rode in the car, she outlined the next steps: finalize the Asia entry strategy, prepare contingency plans, and schedule a board meeting via holographic link in 2 days. Every word painted a picture of how high the stakes really were. We stepped into the hotel's mahogany-paneled lobby, and I felt eyes following us. I brushed off the sensation as paranoia until a man in a charcoal suit approached our table with a folder in hand. His calm smile didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Stanton, Mr. Celeste," he greeted. He handed over the folder. My heart sank as I took it. Inside were surveillance photos, Stanton meeting with government officials, our own financial forecasts, even a map of my apartment floor plan. My name, Celeste Marlowe, typed neatly at the top. He bowed and backed away. Consider this a courtesy reminder. My blood ran cold. Stanton's face was unreadable, but I sensed her fury. We left the luncheon in silence. Back in the car, Stanton's hand brushed mine. "They're testing us, Celeste. They want to see if we crack." I clenched my fist. They don't know who they're dealing with. That evening, I stayed late at the office, poring over blueprints and legal memos. My phone vibrated with alerts. New emails, calendar invites, text messages from concerned friends. But my focus remained razor-sharp. Every keystroke, every annotation, carried the weight of my health hanging in the balance. As midnight approached, I packed my laptop and prepared to leave. The hallway lights had dimmed, and the silence felt complete, until I heard the soft click of heels behind me. I turned. No one was there, but then I spotted a folded note on the floor beside Stanton's office door. I picked it up. The words were scrawled in red ink. "Stop OR, pay the price." My pulse thundered. I tucked the note into my coat pocket and stepped into the elevator, determined. The fight had only just begun. Night had settled over Manhattan, a velvet blanket pierced by the city's neon glow. I stepped out of Stanton & Co.'s sleek building, the threat note burning in my coat pocket like a brand. My breath puffed in the cold October air, and each exhale felt like a warning to the dark, unknown lurking around me. I navigated crowded sidewalks, university students and late-shift workers blurring past. My mind churned with the details from earlier. Stanton's calm resolve, the investor's promise, the chilling photos, the red-inked ultimatum. Each memory felt like a pulse, driving questions I didn't yet have answers for. Reaching the subway entrance, I fumbled for my Metro card. The turnstile clicked, and I descended into the station's echoing hum. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, creating rhythmic strobe patterns that played tricks on my vision. I pressed against the wall near the platform, my heart hammering as I waited for the train. A sudden whoosh signaled its arrival. Doors parted, and I boarded, finding a seat beside a fogged-up window. I stared at my reflection, eyes still bright with determination, shoulders squared in silent defiance. Beneath my coat, my fingers brushed the note tucked inside, its edges sharp. 2 stops later, I stood at my apartment building's entrance. The doorman greeted me with a nod. I managed a tight smile in return. As I rode the elevator to the 14th floor, I felt a strange, calm descend, a focus that whispered I could handle this. Inside my apartment, I flicked on lights and set my bag on the kitchen table. The room looked unchanged. Framed photos on the walls, my grandmother's vintage radio perched on a shelf, the small black and white television that still received one local channel. Normalcy fought to reclaim the space, but I knew it had fled the moment those threats began. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, twisting off the cap. The hiss echoed louder than expected, as though the apartment itself was alive. Listening. I sipped slowly, eyes tracing the familiar contours of my tiny kitchen, searching for something comforting. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A single message from a blocked number. "You should wake up." The text was sent seconds ago. My pulse spiked. I dropped the water bottle, glass rattling in its holder. My hand shot to my pocket. No note, no red ink. The threat had followed me home. A soft knock on the door shattered the silence. I froze, chest tightening. Who could be visiting at this hour? I moved stealthily to the peephole. Through the small lens, I saw a woman in a nurse's uniform. Pale blue scrubs, white cap perched at a jaunty angle. Her features were obscured by a surgical mask. She held a clipboard. My breath caught. "Who is it?" I called, voice steady but distant. "Ms. Marlowe?" she replied, tone professional. "I have your lab results." Lab results? My mind raced. Blood work, scans. I'd scheduled tests to monitor my condition. But this felt off. The last thing I'd expected was a stranger delivering my personal health information. I opened the door a crack, careful to keep the chain on. The nurse's eyes flicked to the chain. "Let me in," she said softly. "The landlords insisted I bring these personally." Landlords? I lived in a building managed by a rental agency downtown, not by private landlords who cared about medical lab results. "Step away from the door," I demanded, my voice firmer. The nurse paused, then sighed as though disappointed. She peeled back her mask. Beneath it was a familiar face. My mother's. I staggered back. "Mom?" I whispered, disbelief and betrayal colliding. Her eyes were sad, tired lines etched deep. "I'm sorry, Celeste." "Why are you?" My voice cracked. "How did you?" She held up the clipboard. The folder inside contained results I had never authorized her to see. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said. "They told me to deliver these so I'd know how sick you are. They think," her voice trembled, "they think if you're too weak, you'll stop." My breath hitched. "They?" Tears welled in her eyes as another knock sounded. Hard this time, insistent. My mother shook her head, pressing a finger to her lips. "They won't stop until you're gone, or until we pay. You have to get back to Stanton and Company. They're the only ones who can protect you." I grasped the doorframe. Betrayal split through me, sharper than any threat note. "What about you?" I asked, voice hollow. She stepped back, mask dropping from her hand. "I'm sorry, Celeste. I love you." The knock came again. This time, I realized it wasn't a nurse. It was something darker, more official. I pulled my mother inside, slammed the door, and bolted it. The knock became a pounding. "Celeste Marlowe, open this door," a low voice demanded. "We need to talk about your tenancy." I looked at my mother. Her face was wet with tears, her hand trembling. "Tell me what to do," I whispered. But we both knew. There was no turning back now. Night had settled over Manhattan, a velvet blanket pierced by the city's neon glow. I stepped out of Stanton & Co.'s sleek building, the threat note burning in my coat pocket like a brand. My breath puffed in the cold October air, and each exhale felt like a warning to the dark unknown lurking around me. I navigated crowded sidewalks, university students and late shift workers blurring past. My mind churned with the details from earlier. Stanton's calm resolve, the investor's promise, the chilling photos, the red-inked ultimatum. Each memory felt like a pulse, driving questions I didn't yet have answers for. Reaching the subway entrance, I fumbled for my Metro card. The turnstile clicked, and I descended into the station's echoing hum. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, creating rhythmic strobe patterns that played tricks on my vision. I pressed against the wall near the platform, my heart hammering as I waited for the train. A sudden whoosh signaled its arrival. Doors parted, and I boarded, finding a seat beside a fogged-up window. I stared at my reflection, eyes still bright with determination, shoulders squared in silent defiance. Beneath my coat, my fingers brushed the note tucked inside, its edges sharp. 2 stops later, I stood at my apartment building's entrance. The doorman greeted me with a nod. I managed a tight smile in return. As I rode the elevator to the 14th floor, I felt a strange calm descend, a focus that whispered I could handle this. Inside my apartment, I flicked on lights and set my bag on the kitchen table. The room looked unchanged. Framed photos on the walls, my grandmother's vintage radio perched on a shelf, the small black and white television that still received one local channel. Normalcy fought to reclaim the space, but I knew it had fled the moment those threats began. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, twisting off the cap. The hiss echoed louder than expected, as though the apartment itself was alive, listening. I sipped slowly, eyes tracing the familiar contours of my tiny kitchen, searching for something comforting. My phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, a single message from a blocked number. "You should wake up." The text was sent seconds ago. My pulse spiked. I dropped the water bottle, glass rattling in its holder. My hand shot to my pocket. No note, no red ink. The threat had followed me home. A soft knock on the door shattered the silence. I froze, chest tightening. Who could be visiting at this hour? I moved stealthily to the peephole. Through the small lens, I saw a woman in a nurse's uniform. Pale blue scrubs, white cap perched at a jaunty angle. Her features were obscured by a surgical mask. She held a clipboard. My breath caught. "Who is it?" I called, voice steady but distant. "Ms. Marlowe?" she replied, tone professional. "I have your lab results." Lab results? My mind raced. Blood work, scans. I'd scheduled tests to monitor my condition. But this felt off. The last thing I'd expected was a stranger delivering my personal health information. I opened the door a crack, careful to keep the chain on. The nurse's eyes flicked to the chain. "Let me in," she said softly. "The landlords insisted I bring these personally." Landlords? I lived in a building managed by a rental agency downtown, not by private landlords who cared about medical lab results. "Step away from the door," I demanded, my voice firmer. The nurse paused, then sighed, as though disappointed. She peeled back her mask. Beneath it was a familiar face, my mother's. I staggered back. "Mom?" I whispered, disbelief and betrayal colliding. Her eyes were sad, tired lines etched deep. "I'm sorry, Celeste." "Why are you?" My voice cracked. "How did you?" She held up the clipboard. The folder inside contained results I'd never authorized her to see. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she said. "They told me to deliver these so I'd know how sick you are. They think," her voice trembled, "they think if you're too weak, you'll stop." My breath hitched. "They?" Tears welled in her eyes as another knock sounded. Hard this time, insistent. My mother shook her head, pressing a finger to her lips. "They won't stop until you're gone, or until we pay. You have to get back to Stanton and Company. They're the only ones who can protect you." I grasped the doorframe. Betrayal split through me, sharper than any threat note. "What about you?" I asked, voice hollow. She stepped back, mask dropping from her hand. "I'm sorry, Celeste. I love you." The knock came again. This time, I realized it wasn't a nurse. It was something darker, more official. I pulled my mother inside, slammed the door, and bolted it. The knock became a pounding. "Celeste Marlowe, open this door!" a low voice demanded. "We need to talk about your tenancy." I looked at my mother. Her face was wet with tears, her hand trembling. "Tell me what to do," I whispered. But we both knew. There was no turning back now. I pressed my back against the door, feeling its cold surface against my spine as the pounding continued. My mother shook, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. I could hear the footsteps retreating, replaced by muffled voices, someone talking to the doorman, showing a copy of the lease, demanding access. "Celeste," my mother whispered. "They're from the city inspectors. They can evict you if you don't comply." Evict me? This was more than a tenancy issue. It was a pretext to flush me out. I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. "We need to stall them." She nodded, grabbing her nurse's clipboard. "Tell them I'm your pain management specialist. I must see you immediately for follow-up." I stepped back from the door, sliding down until I sat on the floor. How did they get involved with the landlords? My mother bit her lip. They offered them incentives, financial and otherwise. They're exploiting every angle. A loud grating came as the doorman tried to force the lock. I stood, drawing a deep breath. "I'll handle this." My mother looked at me, eyes wide. "Be careful." I opened the door slightly and peered into the hallway. The doorman stood with a stern inspector in a dark suit. Papers were in hand, a legally questionable eviction notice. The doorman hesitated as I opened the door further. "Mr. Carlson, Ms. Marlowe?" the inspector asked, voice low but firm. We're here to conduct a welfare check and enforce city regulations. There's a complaint about unauthorized medical practices in this building. I forced calm into my voice. Medical practices? My mother's just delivering lab results. Nothing more. The inspector's gaze flicked to my mother, then to the clipboard in her hands. Ms. Stanton's records show you're not a licensed practitioner here. You're in violation of city code. My mother's face went pale. I'm simply relaying results my daughter requested, she stammered. I interjected. My daughter's private medical business is confidential. These results belong to me. The inspector glared. Ms. Marlowe, you need to sign this form to release the records. Otherwise, you'll face eviction proceedings. I looked at the notice, then at the faces of two people. My mother and this cold bureaucrat. All right. I grabbed the clipboard and signed. As I did, the building's intercom buzzed, and Stanton's low voice came through. Celeste, meet me on the rooftop in 5 minutes. And don't bring anyone else. My stomach twisted. Stanton had no idea about my mother's involvement. Or did she? I handed back the clipboard. I'll cooperate, I said softly. Less than continue, greater than. I watched them leave, closing and relocking the door. The immediate danger had given way to a new one. The betrayal had reached deeper than I thought. I turned to my mother. I have to go. You can't come with me. Quote. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. Be safe, Celeste. I love you. I kissed her forehead and raced to change into a coat suitable for the rooftop's chill. The glass doors to the elevator slid open. Alone, I pressed the rooftop button. Each ding of passing floors stoked my anxiety. When the elevator stopped, I stepped onto the roof. Stanton stood near the edge, her silhouette outlined by the city's glow. The wind tugged at my hair. Good, she said without turning. We don't have time for distractions. They're moving to shut us down completely. Financial institutions, regulators, even local enforcement. I braced myself. Who's behind this? She turned, eyes fierce. Someone with a vendetta against my firm. Someone with deep pockets and a personal grudge. I swallowed. What do you need from me? Her gaze sharpened. I need you to retrieve a file from our server in Zurich. It's encrypted and tied to your credentials. It's the final piece we need to prove their fraud. Are you up for it? My heart pounded with the weight of the task. It could expose everything, or destroy us both. I'm in, I said, voice steady despite the storm inside me. But I'll need time and a secure channel. Stanton nodded. I'll arrange a flight tonight. Pack light. And Celeste, trust no one. As I descended the elevator, the city lights felt colder. Betrayal had reshaped my world, and I was heading into the heart of it. My flight to Zurich departed just before midnight, the hum of the engines a lullaby that barely masked my racing thoughts. I'd packed only essentials. My passport, a change of clothes, and a secure flash drive Stanton provided. Every hour on the plane felt stretched, the seatbelt light switching on a silent reminder that I was on a bridge between worlds. The safety of New York, and the abyss awaiting me in Switzerland. I draped a scarf over my hair, hoping to appear as unremarkable as possible. But as the wheels touched down at Zurich Airport, I felt more exposed than ever. The crisp alpine air bit at my cheeks, a bracing contrast to the clinical hush of the terminal. Stanton's private car waited by the executive arrivals. A driver in a fitted black suit guided me to the back seat, where Stanton slid in beside me, her presence a steady anchor. She offered me a flask of hot tea, an odd luxury at 4 a.m. Drink, she urged. You'll need your wits. I took a tentative sip, warmth flooding my chest. What exactly am I retrieving? Quote, she handed me a tablet that flickered to life, displaying a tight web of accounts, emails, and transaction logs. Each line was a strand in a network of shell corporations, funneling illicit funds to a shadowy figure known only as Orion. This file, she tapped the screen, links Orion to the rival firm. Once we have it, we can expose them and clear Stanton & Co.'s name. But the server is heavily secured, military-grade encryption, biometric locks, and a rotating security shift. My throat tightened. Why me? Why not send IT experts? Her eyes settled on mine. Because you're outside the usual channels, they won't expect your credentials. And because I trust you. Despite the weight of her words, doubt fluttered in my stomach. Trust had become a luxury I couldn't afford. But I nodded. The drive to the data center was silent. We wound through narrow streets flanked by centuries-old buildings, their facades a testament to time's passage. Roman numerals adorned ornate doors, and warm light spilled from cafe windows. It all felt surreal, like stepping into a postcard, but the tension coiled beneath every cobblestone. We pulled up to a nondescript warehouse, iron gates looming like silent sentinels. The driver escorted us inside, where armed guards checked Stanton's clearance badge. Their faces were impassive, eyes like polished onyx. I followed Stanton down a corridor lit by stark fluorescent tubes. My heels clicked, echoing against concrete walls. Doors labeled with numbers and keycard readers lined the hall. Finally, we reached the vault. "This is it," Stanton whispered. "You have 10 minutes." She handed me the tablet and the flash drive. I exhaled sharply and inserted the drive into a slot beneath a biometric scanner. I placed 2 fingers on the glass surface. My prints registered, green lights flashed, and the vault door hissed open. Inside, banks of servers hummed, blue lights pulsing. I guided my hands over the keys, the tablet's instructions mapping each command. Override admin controls, bypass firewall, decrypt segment 1. My voice was steady, though my heart thudded. An alarm blared suddenly. Red lights swept the corridor. I froze, panic hot in my veins. Stanton's voice crackled over my earpiece. "They have eyes on you. Finish the download." "I'm sealing the door remotely." Dust filled the air as metal shutters slid down. Sparks flew where seals activated. I typed faster, each keystroke a lifeline. "Decrypting. Segment 2. 8 seconds to completion." Guards shouted outside, pounding the door. I swallowed fear. 5, 4. A final chime signaled completion. Data streamed onto the drive. I yanked it free and sprinted to the sealed door. Stanton's code unlocked it just as the guards breached the perimeter, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. I barreled past them, adrenaline propelling me through corridors back to the vehicle. The warehouse door slammed shut behind me, sirens piercing the night. Stanton guided the car toward the airport. I clutched the drive, every fiber of my being alive with relief and dread. At the terminal, we said our goodbyes outside the private jet. The data was in Stanton's hands now, but the cost was far from paid. As I walked toward security, my phone buzzed with a single email. "We know you stole our file. We know where you'll be tonight." My blood ran cold. The subject line read, "Not a safe landing." I swallowed hard, stepping into the security line. The world beyond the gate felt smaller, suffocating. I would survive this flight, but would I survive the fallout? This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. My heart thundered as I slipped onto the private jet steps, the security checkpoint a fleeting barrier against the storm of threats trailing me. Stanton's assistant offered a terse nod before the door closed behind me, sealing me in the hushed luxury of the cabin. Plush leather seats cradled me, but I felt no comfort, only the weight of that blaring email, "Not a safe landing." The engines roared to life, thrusting me into the sky. I stared out the window as Zurich's lights faded, swallowed by clouds before I dared close my eyes. Sleep would be a betrayal, rest, an invitation for another attack. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and reviewed the flight manifest. Names of crew, destinations, contact numbers, each line another piece of the puzzle. A soft chime signaled a new message, from Stanton's private line. I hesitated, then opened it. "Celeste, priority evac upon landing. You're heading to London. A safe house is prepared. We need to analyze the Zurich data." Relief mixed with dread. London meant safety, but also deeper immersion in Stanton's battle. I closed the laptop, massaging my temples. Landing felt like descent into a new battlefield. The cold mist of Luton Airport greeted me, and a nondescript van awaited. Inside, I found Stanton's tech specialist, Marcus, tall, intense, with eyes like dark amber. "Good you're safe," he said quietly. "Let's get to work." The safe house was a 3-story townhouse in a silent London suburb. Inside, the walls were lined with screens displaying financial graphs, code lines, and news feeds. Stanton's voice crackled from speakers. "We need to isolate the payments trail. Find out who funded Orion." I handed Marcus the drive. He plugged it into a secure terminal. For hours, we pored over spreadsheets and encrypted logs, tracing transactions through shell corporations in Malta, the Cayman Islands, and, shockingly, across a trust managed by my own estranged father. My breath hitched. "He's involved?" Marcus nodded. "It's all there. Signed documents, transfer orders, offshore accounts. He laundered millions on their behalf." Pain lanced through me. My father had always been distant, aloof, but never so. Mercenary. Stanton's face appeared on the largest screen. "Celeste, you have to confront this. We're close to exposing everything, but we need your proof, your first-hand testimony about betrayal and motive. Can you handle that?" I closed my eyes, summoning every ounce of strength. "I will." The next morning, I drafted an affidavit, a detailed, emotional recounting of my parents' refusal, their collusion, and the threat that had forced me to fight for my life. Each word felt like laying bare a wound. I attached sell orders, bank statements, and the Zurich file. My email left my outbox before doubt could settle in. Hours later, Stanton called. "It's live. Major news outlets are picking it up. Orion's empire is crumbling. But expect a backlash. They're not going down quietly." My phone buzzed incessantly. Journalists, late-night talk shows, activists praising my bravery. But one text froze me, a photo of my childhood home in Lexington engulfed in flames. No caption, no sender. I sank to the floor, tears slipping down my cheeks. Home, my sanctuary, destroyed. Marcus knelt beside me. "They're targeting what you love to break you." I wiped my face. "They'll need more than fire to stop me." That evening, as rain tapped against the windows, I stared at a framed family portrait on the mantel. Mom, Dad, and me, smiles frozen in happier times. The glass glittered with raindrops. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother's number, hoping for an explanation, or at least a word of warning. The line rang, then clicked into voicemail. I exhaled, bitter and resolute. Tomorrow, I'd confront my mother. And if that wasn't enough, I'd take the battle to the darkest corners of those who betrayed me. The morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the hardwood floor of the safe house. I awoke with a sense of dread curling in my chest, the image of my burning childhood home flickering behind my eyelids. Today, I would confront my mother, and likely face the truth I wasn't sure I could bear. Marcus was already at his terminal, headphones on, fingers dancing over the keyboard. He looked up as I entered the room. "We've traced the insurance payouts. The fire was set to look like an accident, but the transfer to your parents' account happened before the blaze. They cashed in on your loss." My veins turned to ice. "They profited from my childhood." He nodded, eyes sympathetic yet resolute. "We need to leverage this. Show the world the depth of their betrayal." I clenched my fists. "Yes." Stanton's call came moments later. "Celeste, I'm sending you back to Lexington. It's time for a face-to-face. You'll have local support, and we can keep you safe." The drive back felt surreal. Endless motorways unraveling beneath the car, fields whizzing by in monochrome streaks. By the time we crested the hill overlooking Lexington, the town looked tranquil, innocent, a stark contrast to the turmoil beneath. I stayed at a discreet guest house on the outskirts, far from prying eyes. Stanton arranged security, drivers, a small team in unmarked cars, digital surveillance. Every precaution for my safety, as I prepared to step back into the lion's den. My mother's number still went unanswered. Instead, I found her at the office building she shared with my father, a modest brick structure housing their small legal practice. I parked a block away, heart pounding. Inside, the air smelled like old leather and polished wood. Law books lined the walls, their spines faded but dignified. I walked through the lobby, past reception, to the office door. It was ajar. "Mom?" My voice trembled. No response. I pushed the door and stepped inside. She sat behind her desk, head bowed, fingers stained with ink. Papers lay scattered, documents Wesley and Marlowe attorneys at law letterhead, invoices, and a ledger with numbers that mirrored what Marcus showed me. She looked up, eyes red but resolute. So you finally came. I closed the door behind me. How could you? Tears welled in her eyes. I did it to protect us. I laughed, bitter. Protect us? From what? She rose, moving to the window. Outside, people walked dogs. Children waited for the school bus. Normalcy thrumming like a heartbeat. Your father. He owed them money. Big money. I shook my head. How long? Since before you were born, she faced me. He borrowed to save the firm. They threatened him, me, your future. When you got sick, they saw an opportunity to squeeze more. My fists clenched at my sides, and you went along with it. She stepped forward, voice quivering. I tried to find another way, but they controlled everything. Banks, lawyers, even local officials. When your medical bills came, they told me, take the money and step aside or watch you die. I closed my eyes, pain twisting inside, and you chose the money. She nodded, tears flowing. I'm sorry, I thought if I could pay, if I could save you later, but it never ended. Silence stretched. Then I turned away, breathing hard. I don't know if I can forgive you. She followed, voice soft. I love you, Celeste. I made the worst choice of my life. I swallowed, then reached into my pocket. I pulled out printed screenshots, transaction records, the Zurich file printouts, affidavits. I placed them on her desk. This is what you're really protecting me from. She reached for them, tears slipping unchecked. Now that it's out, there's no going back. I stepped back. Stanton gave me an ultimatum. Expose everything and rebuild, or stay silent and lose everything. I chose truth. She looked up, anguished. You'll destroy us. I shook my head. I'll free us. The moment hung like a taut wire. Before I left, I paused by the door. I hope you find a way to forgive yourself. Her shoulders shook, tears silent. I hope so too. Outside, the sun felt harsh, unforgiving. I slipped into my car as my phone buzzed. A message from Stanton. Next stop, the media. Tonight's the press conference. Be ready. I exhaled. The confrontation had been more brutal than any threat. But the hardest battles, I realized, were never on the outside. I arrived at the downtown conference center 2 hours before the press conference, nerves as raw as exposed wires. The room buzzed with activity. Journalists setting up cameras, technicians checking microphones, and event staff arranging banners that read, Stanton and Company, Truth Unveiled. I checked in with Stanton's communications team, who gave me a reassuring nod. They'd crafted a message, my story, the evidence, the company's roadmap forward. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that felt like armor, I stood backstage. Stanton approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. They'll try to rattle you with tough questions. Stay calm and stick to the facts. Her voice was a steady anchor. I nodded, inhaled deeply, and approached the podium as the light shifted from blue to white. The clapping began, a murmur at first, then a swell as I stepped into view. Journalists shouted, cameras clicked, and a hush fell as I raised my hand. Good evening, I began, voice clear despite the knots in my stomach. My name is Celeste Marlowe. I stand here not just as a representative of Stanton and Company, but as someone who believes in the power of truth. I spoke of my diagnosis, my parents' refusal, and the threats that followed. I laid out the evidence. The Zurich file, the transaction logs, the insurance claims from Lexington. Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. Flashbulbs popped, and a ripple of shock washed over the audience. A reporter raised her hand. Ms. Marlowe, what would you say to those who think you betrayed your own family? I held her gaze. I loved my family, I still do. But love does not excuse betrayal. We must hold each other accountable. Another voice rang out. Stanton and Company has faced its critics, but can it truly recover from this? How will you rebuild trust? My jaw set. By transparency, we've opened our books, exposed wrongdoing, and we're forging a new path, one defined by integrity. The session lasted 30 minutes, every question a test of grit. When it ended, applause thundered through the hall. I exhaled, relief flooding me. Backstage, Stanton hugged me. You were incredible. I managed a tired smile. What about the fallout? She glanced at her watch. The board meeting is next. They need a plan. I followed her to a glass-walled conference room. Executives sat around a sleek table, faces lined with concern and anticipation. Stanton introduced me as a consultant, my first-hand account a cornerstone of their new strategy. We discussed legal actions, restructuring, and community outreach. My suggestions were met with nods, partnering with patient advocacy groups, funding medical research, and launching a scholarship in my name for students with chronic illnesses. As the meeting adjourned, one of the CFOs approached. You know you're a formidable woman, Celeste. What's next for you? Quote, I paused, considering. My life had been a whirlwind of betrayal, danger, and now the promise of redemption. I think, I said softly, that I'm just getting started. That evening, I returned to the safe house alone. The weight of the day crashed over me. Relief, exhaustion, hope entwined. I sank onto the couch, closing my eyes. My phone buzzed. A video message from my mother. Hesitant, I pressed play. In the flickering light, she stood amidst the charred remains of our home, tears streaking her face. Celeste, she whispered, I'm sorry beyond words. If you ever find it in your heart, I'd like to rebuild. Together. My chest tightened, but I held the message until it ended. I wrote back 2 words. I'll try. As I set the phone down, dawn's first light crept through the curtains. The horizon glowed with possibility. Tomorrow, I'd start a new chapter, one written by my own hand. The morning after the board meeting, I walked through London's Hyde Park, the crisp air filling my lungs with a sense of renewal. The city's bustle felt less like chaos and more like possibility. I sipped my coffee, notebook in hand, jotting down ideas for Stanton & Co.'s next moves. Transparent reporting, community hospital partnerships, and a mentorship program for young professionals with adversity stories to tell. My phone buzzed. Stanton's text, flight to New York at 2 p.m. We need you back on the ground for the media debrief. I closed my notebook. The whirlwind continued, but this time I felt grounded. I'd faced my past, and now I would shape my future. At Heathrow, a private jet awaited. Stanton greeted me with a nod and a brief smile. Ready for the next phase? I nodded. Let's do it. Back in New York, the media cycle had shifted from shock to scrutiny. Reporters dissected every word from the conference. Analysts evaluated Stanton & Co.'s stock, and social media erupted with opinions. I spent the afternoon in the public relations war room, monitoring news feeds, drafting statements, and coordinating interviews. Each victory felt bittersweet. Exposing corruption had hurt those I once loved, but it had to be done. Late that evening, I returned to my apartment, my father's old bachelor pad, which he'd abandoned when the scandal broke. The building's doorman greeted me without surprise, as though he'd come to expect visits at all hours. Inside, I found a letter on the coffee table. The envelope was thick, creamy parchment, sealed with red wax stamped with an unfamiliar crest. A monogram of intertwined letters. M.A. I broke the seal. My dearest Celeste, if you're reading this, you've proven that truth prevails. I refuse to send this through digital means, knowing how easily it could be intercepted. There's much you don't know about me, about your father, and about the forces at play. I write now to give you the full story, in my own words. Meet me at the oldest oak in Lexington's Maple Grove at dawn tomorrow. With all my love, Margaret Ainsley. My breath caught. Margaret. That was my grandmother's name. She died when I was a child, decades before my parents were tied to Orion. I reread the letter. Beneath the signature was an address, a historic farmhouse an hour outside Lexington. Questions tumbled through my mind. Why reveal herself now? What truth was left? I packed an overnight bag, flying back to Kentucky once more. Beneath the farmhouse's weathered beams, I found a hidden study, shelves of leather-bound journals, old photographs, and letters dating back to the early 20th century. I opened a journal belonging to Margaret Ainsley Marlowe, tales of a secret network helping refugees during World War II, documentation of hush money payments to protect that network, and references to a powerful syndicate that spanned continents. The final entry chilled me. They will come for her. My legacy must survive. Protect Celeste. A tear blurred the ink. My grandmother had known. She had battled these shadows long before me. Footsteps in the hall made me spin around. A tall figure stepped through the doorway. Adrienne Stanton. "You came," she said softly. I closed the journal. My grandmother, she was part of this. Stanton nodded. She and a handful of allies disrupted Orion long ago. They thought it dead. They were wrong. Now the battle has passed to you. Anguish and pride mingled in my chest. Why now? She moved closer, eyes grave. Because your grandmother knew it would return, and she knew you were the one to finish this. My shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. A legacy of resistance, betrayal, and survival stretched back generations. I closed my eyes, inhaled, and opened them with determination. I'll finish it. She smiled, a rare warmth lighting her features. I know. Outside, dawn broke over Maple Grove, light filtering through ancient branches. The world felt vast, full of hidden histories and uncharted battles. But for the first time, I felt the weight of destiny settle in my hands, and I was ready to carry it forward. The legacy of Maple Grove lingered in every breath of the dawn air. Centuries-old oaks, mist rising from fields, and secrets buried beneath roots. As Stanton and I stepped onto the farmhouse's veranda, I felt the weight of ancestors guiding me. Stanton guided me into the study, where the journals lay open. We need to understand her network, her allies, and rebuild it. Orion's influence didn't end with your parents. It persists. I traced my grandmother's handwriting in the margins, notes on clandestine meetings, coded messages left in plain sight. She calls them the Guardians. There are at least 10 members documented. Stanton nodded. We'll locate them. My phone buzzed. Security encrypts. A live surveillance feed from my London safe house. The screen lit up with blurry figures scaling the back wall. They're coming for it, I whispered. Stanton's jaw clenched. We'll secure the data here, transport everything to a hidden vault under this farmhouse. We moved swiftly. Books, drives, and documents were packed into lead-lined cases. As Stanton organized transport, I reviewed the journals, seeking the Guardians' identities. Names appeared. A retired MI6 officer, a Swiss banker, an Irish journalist, and a few unknowns. Upon closer inspection, I found an encoded address in Paris, likely a meeting place. My breath caught. Paris! Stanton placed a calming hand on my shoulder. They won't expect you. You'll go alone. Alone, the word echoed. But I nodded, resolve solidifying. 2 hours later, I boarded a night train to Paris, the case strapped across my back. Every click of the tracks beneath me pushed me closer to the next step and deeper into danger. Paris greeted me with rain-slicked streets and lamplit boulevards. I wore a dark coat, hood up, moving through the Gare de la Prouds. The address led me to a tiny cafe tucked in a narrow alley, La Phoenix. Inside, the scent of strong espresso and fresh croissants mingled. I slid into a corner booth. Moments later, a man in a fedora and trench coat approached. His face was obscured by shadow. "You're Miss Marlowe?" he asked, voice gravelly. I nodded. He sat, placing a slip of paper on the table. "Samuel Bradford, former MI6. I knew your grandmother." My heart pounded. "You're the Guardian." He poured coffee. "One of them. She saved my life in 45. Now, she saved yours, ensuring this network would pass to a Marlowe." I unfolded the paper. Notes on Orion's financial backers in Europe. Contacts. Safe houses. He leaned forward. "We need more allies. The last Guardian is my granddaughter, Claire. Find her in Barcelona." My chest tightened. The network stretched across Europe. Why the secrecy? Because Orion infiltrates everything, from banks to governments. We only move in shadows. I placed the notes in the case. "What's our next move?" Bradford's eyes were solemn. "Expose Document 0. It's the charter Orion used to incorporate its operations, proof of its illegality. It's hidden in a vault beneath the Banque Centrale in Brussels." My pulse thundered. Brussels, a city at the heart of European power. He slid me a small key. This will grant you access for 5 minutes. After that, we activate the failsafe. I felt the enormity of the task. I'll go. Back at the station, I booked a ticket to Brussels. As the train pulled out, I stared at the passing fields, each horizon bringing me closer to the climax of a legacy spanning generations. The farmhouse's secrets, my grandmother's sacrifices, my parents' betrayals, all converged on this moment. In Brussels, war sirens sounded as late-night traffic drifted. I reached the Banque Centrale's grand facade under a silver moon. Security was tighter than Zurich. Guards, cameras, retinal scanners. I slipped past the foyer, using the key to access a maintenance corridor. The lights flickered as I descended marble stairs into the bowels of the bank. Each echo of my footsteps reminded me of the stakes. I found the vault, a steel door with a digital lock. I inserted the key, the lock clicked. The door opened to reveal stacks of crates. I located Document 0 in a sealed envelope marked with an old Marlowe crest. As I lifted it, alarms blared. Red lights spun. I clutched the envelope, adrenaline sharpening my senses. Sirens approached. I sprinted down the corridor, sealing the vault behind me. Security hacked doors open, but Stanton's network had silently disabled many systems. I burst into the night air, document in hand, and ran through Brussels' winding streets to an extraction point. Stanton's driver was waiting. I dove in, breathless. As the car sped away, I opened the envelope. Document 0 lay before me, an 80-year-old charter signed by Orion's founders. Its legitimacy was the key to dismantling the entire organization. I exhaled, heart pounding. This was the proof we needed. All that remained was to bring Orion into the light and watch it burn. The drive back from Brussels to Normandy's hidden safe room was a blur of headlights and blurred landmarks. I sat in the back seat, Document 0 pressed against my chest like a lifeline. Its aged parchment crackled softly, the signatures of Orion's founders still visible, each stroke a testament to secrets buried for decades. In the safe room, Stanton and our European team gathered around a long table. Maps of global financial nodes adorned the walls. Marcus traced a route from our farmhouse vault to news bureaus around the world. Bradford and Claire, Bradford's granddaughter, flanked them, forming a circle of guardians united across generations. I placed the charter on the table. This is it. With this, we tear down every shell company, freeze their assets, and expose every collaborator. Bradford's eyes glistened. My grandmother would be proud. Your grandmother, I mean. Claire stepped forward, her sharp gaze assessing me. A Marlowe's work is never done. Orion's influence extends beyond money. They manipulate data, politics, lives. We need a global operation. Stanton nodded. We launch tomorrow. Coordinated releases to every major outlet, secure petitions with regulatory bodies, and direct action teams in key financial centers. Celeste, you lead the public narrative. I swallowed. The weight of leadership pressed down. I won't fail. That night, I drafted the manifesto, an open letter from the Guardians, detailing the truth of Orion's crimes. Each word hammered the message, the network's long reach, the pain inflicted, and the promise of accountability. At dawn, my phone buzzed with Stanton's voice note. All set. We go live in 1 hour. I stood before the mirror, dressed in a simple white blouse, symbol of transparency, and met my reflection. In my grandmother's eyes, I saw the echoes of courage pass down. I inhaled deeply and walked to the secure broadcast studio. The cameras clicked on, and I looked into the lens. Today, we reclaim our world from the shadows. As I spoke, the manifesto appeared on screens worldwide. News channels cut in, social media trends erupted, and regulators mobilized. In that moment, the power of truth shattered the walls Orion had built. But as the broadcast ended, my phone buzzed with Stanton's urgent text. They're hitting back. Cyber attacks. Hostile takeovers of our accounts. Brace for war. I exhaled. The battle had only begun. But I was ready. Our war room was alive with frenetic energy as I strode in, the walls now splashed with global time zones, our manifesto rolling across monitors like a digital tide. The Guardians, Stanton's team, and our support network were on high alert. Keyboards clattered, calls were patched in, and live feeds flickered. The first wave of Orion's retaliation hit our systems as planned. Cyber assaults aimed at disabling our broadcast network, ransomware messages demanding we withdraw our manifesto, and DDoS attacks flooding our servers. Marcus countered each strike, deploying encryption shields and rerouting traffic through ghost servers. Yet, the heaviest blow came from hostile financial maneuvers. Orion shell firms initiated margin calls on Stanton and Company accounts, seeking to freeze our operational capital. The CFRG, a global coalition of regulators we alerted, responded swiftly, issuing emergency orders to block Orion's transactions and protect our assets. In the midst of chaos, I realized something critical. We had the momentum, but Orion had reach. We needed to strike at their heart, their media influence. They had allies in press organizations worldwide, ready to spin our revelations into rumors of false claims. I convened a meeting of key media heads under a safe harbor, top editors from the Financial Chronicle, Euronews, and the Global Tribune. Each subscribed to journalistic integrity, and I needed their voices. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, scanning their expectant faces. We stand at a pivotal moment. Orion's network thrives on misinformation, on controlling narratives to shield its crimes. Today, I ask you to join a pledge, a commitment to verify, to investigate, and to tell the unfiltered truth we've uncovered. Their nods and firm handshakes signaled a coalition, media guardians willing to stand against corporate deceit. Press releases supporting the manifesto were aggregated under a unified banner, Truth Alliance. Within hours, headlines across continents read, "Journalists Unite Against Global Shadow Network." Back in the war room, that media coup reverberated. Public opinion swung heavily in our favor, and social media sentiment analysis spiked into positive overdrive. Stock markets reacted. Stanton and Company shares stabilized, while Orion-backed entities saw record sell-offs. But battles on multiple fronts were draining. I needed a decisive blow to break Orion's backbone. I referenced the Guardian Network's files, a list of covert accounts used to fund political lobbying in election cycles. Exposing those could dismantle their political influence forever. I stood at the podium in Stanton & Co.'s auditorium, cameras live streaming. Behind me, a digital map pulsed with red nodes, Orion's funding routes. Today, we unveil Orion's influence scheme, how they've shaped policies, bribed officials, and undermined democracies. With this evidence, we call on governments to enact immediate sanctions and legal action. I presented documents, emails from lobbyists, bank records showing transfers to campaign funds, and testimonies from insiders fearing for their lives. The auditorium rumbled as one of our media allies, the Financial Chronicle's editor, joined me on stage, vouching for the authenticity of the findings. This coordinated assault toppled several high-profile politicians linked to Orion, arrest warrants were issued, and parliamentary inquiries launched. Orion's digital fortress began to crumble. Yet, among the triumph, an encrypted message arrived on my secure channel. "You've made powerful enemies. We're coming for you, tonight." No name, no signature, just a countdown timer. 6 hours. My breath caught. A guardian by my side, Claire, placed a hand on my shoulder. "They'll target your personal vulnerabilities now, you and your loved ones." I closed my eyes. The magnitude of our impact was undeniable, but vengeance lurked in the shadows. Determination took hold. "We push forward," I said, voice unwavering. "We finish this." Claire nodded. "First, we secure the safe houses. Then, we strike back." The countdown pulsed on the screen. As hours ticked away, I prepared for the final confrontation, knowing that the fate of a world hidden in shadows rested on the strength of our truth. Night cloaked our safe house in silence, broken only by the steady hum of backup generators and the distant wail of London traffic. Claire and I moved through the rooms, ensuring every window was sealed, every door locked, and every blind drawn. Sheltered within these walls were the remaining Guardians, Stanton's core team, and a handful of activists and insiders who'd pledged to stand with us. I reviewed the encrypted message again, a timer ticking down. 3 hours until the promised attack. My pulse accelerated at the thought of what they might unleash. A physical strike? A cyber assault more devastating than before? Or a smear campaign targeting my loved ones? Claire placed a reassuring hand on my arm. We'll get through this, we have to. I nodded, steeling myself. Do we have a plan? She gestured to the war room monitor. We've rerouted our most sensitive assets here. Stanton & Co.'s main server is now mirrored in 3 undisclosed locations. If they knock us offline, we'll still broadcast. I exhaled. And the safe houses? Armored convoys and decoys are in place. If they attempt an assault, we'll relocate everyone within minutes. A soft ping signaled a new alert, an attempted breach on Claire's phone, likely a hacking probe. We immediately switched frequencies, cutting off external signals. I moved to the front window and peered out into the London night. A black van idled across the street, its windows tinted. 2 figures in dark clothing stood by the passenger door. My blood ran cold. Claire, I whispered. They're here. She nodded, hissing into her comms. Team Alpha, front entrance. Move now. Moments later, footsteps pounded on the reinforced door. A muffled voice boomed. Open up, Celeste Marlowe. This is a state-sanctioned operation. Step aside. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding. They don't have jurisdiction here, I muttered. Claire strapped on a headset. These are mine safety protocols. They'll claim they're from the security services, but we know better. I moved to the safe room's control panel, initiating lockdown procedures. Steel bars slid into place across doors. Cameras toggled to record the event. The pounding intensified. Claire and I exchanged a determined glance. Now, I said. Moments later, a diversion erupted at the rear gate. Team Bravo detonated flash charges to stun the assailants and create chaos. In the confusion, vehicles screeched away from the front entrance. Security personnel, vetted allies, streamed out from hidden rooms and apprehended 2 intruders. Claire grabbed one's mask and ripped it off. A man's face stared back, pale, disoriented, eyes wide. He wore an insignia I recognized from the old journals, Orion's symbol. He stammered, I was following orders. I stepped forward. You work for Orion. Who sent you? He swallowed. I can't say they'll kill me. Quote. Claire cuffed him. We'll keep you alive. This ends tonight. Meanwhile, I ordered Stanton's team to secure the hostage and extract him for interrogation. The others were safe in deeper bunkers beneath the house. We waited for the countdown. The timer on my tablet ticked, 1 hour left. I took a moment to call the crisis hotline for my mother. Her voice answered, shaky but alive. Mom, I said softly, I need you to stay safe. I love you. Tears in her voice echoed mine. I'm locked in the rebuilt house with security. I'm safe. You focus on this. I ended the call, resolve crystallizing. This was more than a battle for my future. It was a battle for my family's legacy. Claire approached, holding a file. The hostage says Orion's last move is a financial weapon, biometric sabotage. They'll trigger the Kylar algorithm to wipe out biometric authentication globally. My eyes widened. Without biometrics, our mirrored servers can't verify access. We'd be locked out. Claire nodded gravely. They'll compromise everything. Bank accounts, security systems, even medical devices. The world will descend into chaos. I clenched my fists. We can't let that happen. We need a countermeasure. Stanton's voice crackled in. I've activated the failsafe, a quantum encryption override. We'll regain control post-sabotage, but we need to trigger it before midnight. I checked the timer. 30 minutes to go. The pounding resumed at the door. This time, a hail of bullets thudded against the reinforced walls. Claire and I exchanged a fierce grin. Time to end this. We initiated the override, typing commands in unison. The walls reverberated as the intruders intensified their assault. The timer hit 0. For a heart-stopping moment, everything went dark. Then, lights flickered back. Screens returned. War room servers buzzed, biometric locks disengaged, and security cams came online. The override succeeded. Claire sighed with relief. They don't expect that. I moved to the window. The front gate's steel bars retracted. security forces detained the remaining intruders. Orion's assault had been thwarted. My heart pounded with adrenaline. Outside, the London night returned to its usual rhythm. But I knew this fight was far from over. Orion's reach might be broken, but its shadows lingered. As dawn approached, I felt the first true sense of victory, and the knowledge that the legacy of the Guardians would endure. Morning light filtered through the safe house's blackout curtains as I sat surrounded by the remains of last night's battle. Spent shell casings, scattered files, and the intangible residue of fear. Claire and Marcus tended to the wounded, while Stanton and Bradford reviewed surveillance footage. I poured coffee, feeling the warmth steady my shaking hands. The world outside seemed oblivious to the chaos we'd endured. Gray skies loomed over London, but in this room, determination burned bright. Stanton approached, her stride purposeful. We've locked down our remaining targets. Orion's network is collapsing. Banks are freezing their accounts, governments issuing warrants, and media exposing every atrocity. I nodded, tracing a fingerprint on a blistered hard drive. We stopped the immediate threat, but Orion's remnants could regroup. Bradford joined us, his weathered face set in lines of concern. The Guardians need to solidify our legacy, formalize this network for future generations. We must transition from secrecy to a sanctioned oversight body. The idea resonated. Hideous though Orion was, its dismantling left a vacuum in global oversight. A formal coalition, an international Sentinel Council, could prevent future shadows from rising. Claire chimed in. We have the expertise, journalists, ex-intelligence officers, financial watchdogs. We just need structure, charter, and backing. Stanton offered a document. I've drafted a provisional charter. It outlines membership criteria, governance, transparency measures, and enforcement capabilities. I scanned the pages. The ambition was staggering. A council with authority to audit banks, regulate political donations, and enforce anti-corruption laws across borders. It would require UN recognition and cooperation with Interpol. Bradford placed a gnarled hand on my shoulder. Your grandmother would have fought for this. You can build her vision. My chest tightened. Legacy defined me, fueled me, but this was bigger than vengeance. It was about shaping a safer world. I exhaled, steady. Let's do it. For the next 12 hours, the war room transformed into a drafting chamber. We debated clauses, potential partners, and enforcement mechanisms. The provisional charter took shape, weaving ingredients of justice, accountability, and hope. Marcus, handling technical logistics, set up encrypted portals for member communication. Claire designed a public launch plan, simultaneous unveiling in London, New York, Brussels, and Tokyo. As dusk settled, we prepared for the official announcement. I changed into a tailored black dress, a nod to formality, and stepped onto the stage set in the safe house's yard, now converted into a makeshift press zone. Cameras, lights, and attendees, leading journalists, diplomats, and activists, waited under a canopy of string lights. I took the podium, heart calm. Today marks not only the end of Orion's tyranny, but the beginning of a new era. The International Sentinel Council will stand as a guardian against corruption, ensuring transparency and justice prevail. A round of applause swelled, voices echoing my grandmother's dream. After the speech, I mingled with diplomats from the UN delegation. A delegate from Switzerland approached, extending his hand. Madame Marlowe, you have our support. We'll push for a UN resolution. I smiled, hope swelling. Yet, as the crowd dispersed, Stanton caught my eye. She handed me a secure phone. I answered. The line crackled, a voice whispering, "Well done. But remember, every light casts a shadow. There will always be threats to guard against." I pressed the phone closed, the weight of her words settling. The council would need vigilance, not just power. That night, I stood on the balcony, overlooking London's twinkling lights. Claire joined me, handing over a flask of tea. To Guardians, she toasted softly. I clinked the rim. To legacy. And as the city breathed below, I realized that my fight, born from betrayal and survival, had blossomed into something enduring, proof that truth, once wielded by brave hearts, could reshape the world. The formation of the International Sentinel Council sent ripples through the world's power corridors. In the days that followed the launch, I traveled between capitals, New York, Brussels, Tokyo, meeting with lawmakers, judges, and heads of state. Each meeting reinforced the Council's mandate to protect transparency and uphold accountability across borders. Yet behind diplomatic handshakes and media accolades, I sensed the undercurrents of resistance. Old money whispered in boardrooms, their influence threatened by our charter's far-reaching authority. Political elites bristled at the idea of outside scrutiny. And somewhere in the shadows, remnants of Orion plotted their resurgence. In Manhattan, I met with Senator Elena Zhang, chair of the Senate Ethics Committee. Her office overlooked the Hudson River, the sun glinting off the water as she leaned across her desk. Ms. Marlowe, your council's goal is noble, but some in Congress worry about overreach. How do we safeguard sovereignty? I met her gaze steadily. By embedding accountability into our framework, Sentinel Council decisions will require unanimous consent from regional oversight boards. No single nation can dictate outcomes. We protect sovereignty by preventing corruption from undermining it. She nodded thoughtfully. I'll bring it to the floor this week. Next, I flew to Brussels to convene with Interpol's director, a stoic woman named Camille Dubois. In a secure chamber beneath the Europol building, we hashed out protocols for cross-border investigations, evidence sharing, and witness protection. Each detail was critical. A misstep could derail our mission. But not all encounters were diplomatic. One evening, as I reviewed drafts in a hotel in Tokyo, I noticed a drone hovering outside my window. It was small, unmarked, but its lens tracked my every move. Alarm bells rang. I shut the blinds and activated the hotel's privacy shield, a mesh of signal blockers and motion sensors supplied by Stanton. The drone emitted a low whirring before its feed cut off. I exhaled, adrenaline coursing. Claire's voice came over the secure line. We've detected multiple drones around your location. You need to leave now. I grabbed my briefcase and slipped into a side exit. Within minutes, a car whisked me to a safe house, one of many we'd established globally. Each safe house was a fortress. Underground rooms, self-sustaining power, autonomous communication lines. As I entered, Bradford awaited, his expression grave. They're testing us, he said. Orion's remnants will use any method to discredit or eliminate the Sentinel Council. I nodded. Then we show strength through transparency, no more shadows. Together we convened a digital summit across all council members. Camera feeds flickered to life in various languages and faces. On the screen, a unified banner proclaimed, Sentinel Council, united in vigilance. I addressed the assembly. We face an enemy that thrives on secrecy. Our defense is the light we shine, the connections we forge, and the truths we uphold. Let's coordinate, increase cybersecurity, share intel on Orion operatives, and fast-track passage of the Council's charter in every member state. We will not falter. A chorus of agreement resonated. Weeks blurred into months as the Council's momentum built. Educational programs launched in universities, teaching ethics and transparency. Financial institutions integrated Sentinel audits into compliance checks, reducing corruption by unprecedented margins. My mother's foundation in Lexington became one of the Council's flagship outreach centers. Yet the fight for hearts and minds continued. I found myself standing at podiums, testifying before parliaments, writing op-eds, and mentoring young activists. Each interaction reinforced my belief. Vigilance wasn't a momentary act, but a lifelong commitment. One late night in Geneva, I sat at a cafe overlooking Lake Geneva, sipping tea as snowflakes drifted down. Claire joined me, sliding into the seat across. You look tired, she teased. I smiled wearily. It's worth it. She pointed to my reflection in the window, eyes bright with purpose. Your grandmother started this. Your mother nearly broke it, and you rebuilt. What will your legacy be? I considered her question. My journey had taken me from illness and betrayal to empowerment and purpose. I realized my legacy wouldn't just be the Council. It would be the stories we inspired. I set the cup down. I want to tell our story, not just through charters and councils, but through voices, books, films, podcasts, so the next generation doesn't wait for darkness to act. Claire grinned. A storyteller turned sentinel. I laughed softly. Exactly. As the snow gently fell, I felt a sense of peace and a burning drive to keep moving forward. For the shadows would always shift, and the light must never waver. The scent of jasmine and sea salt drifted through my villa's veranda as I watched the sunset over Ibiza's cliffs. It was a rare moment of respite, a retreat organized by the Sentinel Council for its leading members. The Mediterranean breeze carried whispers of waves against limestone and distant laughter from the infinity pool. It felt almost surreal after months of relentless battles. Beside me, Stanton studied the horizon, her posture relaxed yet alert. "How does it feel?" she asked softly. I closed my eyes, letting the sun's warmth seep into my bones. Healing. The word tasted foreign, cherished. Our hosts, the Balearic branch of the council, had curated this retreat to foster unity among key figures: Claire, Bradford, Marcus, and a rotating cast of specialists. We'd share strategies, strengthen bonds, and, perhaps, allow ourselves a moment of calm. Dinner was served under a canopy of twinkling lights. Plates bore Mediterranean delicacies: octopus carpaccio, saffron paella, and local olives. Conversations drifted from ethics training to the future of global transparency. I found solace in the camaraderie. Individuals from diverse backgrounds united by a shared mission. Later, I walked along a cliffside path with Bradford. His silver hair caught the moonlight, and his pace was steady despite his age. "Your grandmother would have loved this," he murmured. "She believed in beauty, even in darkness. It reminded her why we fight." I nodded. And now I understand. If we lose sight of what we protect, our mission loses meaning. He smiled, offering a small bottle of Spanish wine, a toast to guardianship. The next morning, I woke to Marcus's urgent knock. My secure phone buzzed. Intelligence on rising tensions in Johannesburg. A mining conglomerate tied to Orion's shell companies was pressuring local governments to suppress union protests, endangering thousands. I dressed quickly and called Revelation. "I'm going to South Africa." Claire intercepted. "Already arranged. You'll have an escort to Pretoria." Within hours, I landed in Johannesburg. The city throbbed with energy. Street vendors, bustling markets, the echo of drums. Yet beneath the vibrant surface, tensions simmered. Signs of protest lined the roads. Workers' rights now, and stop corporate exploitation. Stanton's African liaison, Thabo Mbeki Jr., met me at the airport. His resemblance to his grandfather, South Africa's former president, was uncanny. Behind those kind eyes lay political savvy. "Welcome, Ms. Marlowe," he greeted. "The miners need your support." We drove to a shantytown on the edge of the mining region. The air smelled of dust and sweat. Families lived in corrugated metal shacks, each a fortress against uncertainty. A group of miners gathered around a makeshift podium, voices hoarse from chanting. Their leader, a steelworker named Kwame Dlamini, approached me, shaking my hand firmly. "Celeste Marlowe," he said, voice gravelly with emotion. "We know what your council stands for. We need you." I listened to their plight: unsafe working conditions, underpaid labor, and environmental degradation. The conglomerate's local executives dismissed protests with threats, and local law enforcement often sided with corporate interests. I spoke to Thabo in private. "We have to shine a spotlight: public pressure, UN oversight, and legal action." He nodded. "We've prepared a resolution for the African Union, but we need your council's backing." I stepped before the miners. "The Sentinel Council will stand with you. We'll help draft legal complaints, launch an international campaign, and ensure your voices reach beyond these hills." Their cheers echoed off the limestone walls. I felt the power of unity, the same strength that had fueled my journey. That night, under a dusty sky, I joined the miners' protest, holding a lantern as they marched through the camp. The flame flickered in the wind, a symbol of hope. Back at the council's temporary office in Pretoria, I monitored international responses. News outlets covered the protests, regulators launched preliminary inquiries, and global NGOs pledged support. Yet, as the momentum rose, I felt the familiar stir of caution. Victory was never permanent. I sat on the balcony, staring at the silhouetted city skyline. The world's challenges were endless, from corrupt conglomerates to shadow networks. But each step, each ally, each story told, wove a tapestry of resilience. I closed my eyes, the scent of jasmine still lingering, and vowed to protect the flame, as my grandmother had, as my mother had hoped, and as I was destined to do. The dawn chorus of birds in Cape Town greeted me as our small delegation arrived at the International Criminal Court. Behind its austere columns lay the promise of justice, a venue where corporate crimes and human rights violations could be adjudicated on a global stage. I adjusted my blazer, nerves humming with purpose. Thabo walked beside me, clipboard in hand. Your submission is groundbreaking, Celeste. We've outlined charges against the conglomerate's executives and the local officials who abetted them. If accepted, this will set a precedent. Inside the courtroom's foyer, representatives from NGOs, UN observers, and media outlets mingled. The gravity of the setting weighed on me, but I drew confidence from the Sentinel's collective work. A clerk ushered us into a quiet antechamber. Ms. Marlowe, your documents, please. I handed over a thick binder, evidence of unsafe labor conditions, emails showing collusion, financial trail tying shell companies to high-ranking politicians. Each document bore the Sentinel Council's seal. The clerk nodded gravely. We'll notify you of the hearing date. Thank you. As we exited, cameras flashed. I realized the moment transcended personal triumph. It was a symbol of accountability for every clenched fist and lost life. From The Hague, I flew to Geneva to attend a UN Human Rights Council meeting. The agenda included a new resolution inspired by our findings in South Africa, aimed at protecting labor rights in vulnerable communities. My speech would come that afternoon. In the chamber, delegates shuffled papers as I took the podium. The room's energy was electric. A hush fell. Honored delegates, I began, voice clear. Today I stand before you not as a corporate executive, but as a caretaker of truth and justice. The Sentinel Council's work in South Africa has shown that when communities unite and transparency prevails, oppression trembles. I outlined the ICC submission and UN resolution, urging member states to support both. My speech was met with muted applause, powerful allies but also cautious observers. During a recess, I spoke with Ambassador Amina Al-Hussein of Jordan. She grasped my hand warmly. This could change the future for millions, but it requires vigilance. I nodded. One case at a time, one law at a time. That evening, as the Council's global leaders convened in a private session at the Palais des Nations, I sensed the weight of history. We drafted a framework for future ICC referrals and UN resolutions, ensuring the Council's role in championing rights remained unassailable. Back in London, in the sanctuary of the Safe House, I reflected on the past days. South African miners gaining justice, ICC charges, UN resolutions, the Council's vision expanding across continents. Yet a new challenge surfaced, an encrypted communiqué from Claire highlighting rapid climate legislation stalling in fragile states, due to corporate lobbying shaping policies in secret. Without transparent governance, environmental crises would escalate. I leaned back, tracing the map of climate hotspots. The Council's remit had to evolve, protecting not only human rights, but also the planet itself. I drafted a proposal for an environmental sentinel task force, a specialized unit to monitor corporate environmental impact, enforce pollution controls, and hold violators accountable under international law. At dawn, I called a meeting with Stanton, Claire, Bradford, and Thabo. Our mission has grown. We must become guardians of the planet, too. They exchanged looks. Bradford's voice was soft but firm. My grandmother fought fascism. Now, we fight for life on Earth. Stanton tapped her tablet. I've already allocated resources. We can launch the task force by month's end. Claire smiled. From medical debt to global justice to environmental guardianship, your journey has been extraordinary. I exhaled, heart pounding with purpose. We're just getting started. Outside, the London sky was grey, but I felt a surge of brightness. The legacy of the Guardians and the Sentinel Council would protect not only people, but the planet they call home. Winter descended over London with a biting chill that seeped into bones and memories alike. The Sentinel Council's headquarters, nestled within a refurbished warehouse in Shoreditch, glowed with the warmth of purpose, a stark contrast to the frost outside. I walked its halls, passing holographic displays of ongoing initiatives, labor rights, political accountability, and now environmental protection. I paused in front of a screen, showcasing satellite imagery of the Arctic, melting ice caps, and vanishing wildlife. The Environmental Sentinel Task Force had launched its first campaign, targeting a multinational corporation illegally dumping chemicals into Greenland's fjords. The data was damning. Water samples, wildlife assessments, and whistleblower testimonies collected by our field teams. Claire emerged from the task force war room, where codenames like Operation Polar Light streamed in neon letters. You should see what these reports say. Sea temperatures rising faster than predicted. We need to act before ecosystems collapse. I nodded, peering at the charts. Prepare a public release. We proceed like we did with Orion, but this time we hold corporations accountable for ecological crimes. She smiled, fierce. Consider it done. The next morning we unveiled the findings at a press conference outside Westminster. Journalists shivered in the cold, breath visible in puffs as they awaited our statements. I addressed the crowd, voice cutting through the winter air. Global warming isn't an abstract concept, it's a crime scene. We have evidence that company Novachem knowingly discharged toxic effluents into Greenland's waterways, accelerating environmental collapse. The Environmental Sentinel Task Force calls on governments to freeze their assets, launch investigations, and impose immediate sanctions. The flashbulbs popped. Social media erupted. Environmental groups rallied. For the first time, the Summit of Powerful Nations couldn't ignore our call. Later, in the Council's strategy room, Stanton debriefed me. The EU has announced provisional sanctions. The UN Environment Programme will open an inquiry. This is a major victory. I allowed a small smile. But it's just the beginning. Weeks bled into months as the Council's influence grew. We trained regional environmental cells in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Marcus and his team built an AI-driven platform, Project Gaia, to monitor pollution in real time using satellite data and IoT sensors. One early morning, my phone buzzed with an alert from Project Gaia, an oil spill off the coast of Indonesia. I dialed our Jakarta liaison, Rini Hartono, an environmental lawyer with a fiery passion. Celeste, she said, voice urgent, an offshore drilling firm welded shut containment valves to cut costs. The spill's already poisoning local fisheries. We have days to stop it. I booked the next flight. In Jakarta, the air was thick with humidity and worry. Rini led me to a coastal village where fishermen pointed to slicked waters and dead fish bobbing on the surface. I lifted a bloodied tripod-mounted sensor from the beach, part of Project Gaia's deployment kit, its readings confirming toxic hydrocarbons at levels 20 times the safety threshold. We mobilize local activists, leak the data to the international press, and coordinate with the Indonesian Environmental Agency, I declared. Rini nodded, determination in her eyes. We'll file injunctions against the firm tomorrow. In a hotel room overlooking Jakarta Bay, I drafted the press release. By dawn, news outlets across Asia were broadcasting images of our data, public outrage soared, and the drilling firm's CEO faced arrest warrants, that morning alone. Back in London, I addressed the council via hologram. We set a precedent. Environmental crimes are crimes, and will pursue them as relentlessly as corporate corruption. Bradford, his eyes weary but proud, raised a toast via video link to Planet Sentinel. But as I removed my earpiece, a notification popped, a private message from Stanton. Meet me in the archives. Urgent. I hurried to the archives room, a subterranean vault filled with the council's historical records. Stanton stood beside a secured vault door, concern etched in her face. We've discovered an anomaly in Margaret Ainsley Marlowe's original journals, an entry we missed. I exhaled. What is it? Quote. She handed me a worn page. yellowed with age. My grandmother's handwriting detailed a final directive. If the shadows ever return stronger than before, the last recourse lies with the Marlowe Initiative, a unilateral authority to intervene without notice. It is a responsibility given to only one person in the lineage, Celeste. My breath caught. The Marlowe Initiative, an emergency power vesting absolute decision-making in a single sentinel. Stanton's voice was quiet. This is why Orion resurged. They knew this power existed and sought to control it. You're the only one who can activate it. My pulse thundered. Absolute authority, necessary to defeat the deepest shadows, but prone to abuse. I slid the journal page into my pocket. When do we decide? She met my gaze. If we face an existential threat, you'll know. Until then, safeguard this knowledge. That night, I lay awake, pondering the burden passed down through generations. To wield unchallengeable power if the world's shadows grew too dense. My grandmother's final legacy was both a gift and a prison. I rose at dawn and stepped onto the rooftop, watching London awaken, its streets bathed in pale light. The world was safer thanks to the Sentinel Council, but I carried the weight of my lineage's last recourse. And I vowed, should darkness descend again, I would stand ready to unleash the Marlowe Initiative, no matter the cost. The world had come to rely on the Sentinel Council's watchful eye. In high-rises and humble huts alike, people whispered of Celeste Marlowe, not as a fallen heiress or a victim of betrayal, but as a guardian of truth, a beacon in a world too often cloaked in lies. Yet despite the praise, I felt the weight of unseen burdens. Orion's embers still flickered, and the Marlowe Initiative loomed beneath my skin, a power that could consume as easily as it could save. London bathed in spring light as I arrived at the council's central chamber, a converted cathedral whose stained glass windows cast colorful patterns on marble floors. Today's agenda: reviewing a surge of petitions from regions plagued by urgent crises. Amazon wildfires, refugee rights violations, and deepfake political manipulation. Our resources were stretched thin. Stanton greeted me. We've prioritized 3 hotspots: the Amazon, Eastern Europe, and cyber manipulation in Southeast Asia. I nodded, scanning the situation reports. Each crisis threatened millions. We mobilized task forces, partnered with local NGOs, and secured rapid response funding. But beneath the operational whirlwind, a personal missive awaited, a letter from my mother, Margaret Marlowe. In shaky handwriting, she confessed that her actions, though driven by fear, left her drowning in guilt. She had established a foundation in Lexington, using her legal practice's remaining assets to fund medical research and support families. She invited me home, to heal the wounds left by betrayal. I folded the letter, tears pricking my eyes. Forgiveness was a journey I'd only just begun. That night, I stood before the cathedral's altar, lit by thousands of candles burning for global harmony. I closed my eyes, offering thanks for our victories and strength for the battles ahead. Suddenly, the council's emergency alarm pierced serenity. A coded message flashed on the screen: critical breach, Sentinel data vault compromised. My heart lurched. The data vault housed the Council's most sensitive archives, including the Zurich file, Document 0, and the record of the Marlowe Initiative. If compromised, the world's guardianship could unravel. I raced down corridors to the vault's secure doors. The defense system showed signs of remote tampering, expert hands overriding safeguards. Stanton and Marcus followed. "Who has this capability?" I demanded. Marcus's face was pale. Not Orion, they've burned their resources, but someone with inside knowledge, someone with access codes. Stanton's gaze turned to me. The Marlowe padlock requires dual authorization, yours and mine. Is it possible someone forced your hand? I froze, heart hammering. Could someone have coerced me into unlocking the vault? The thought felt like a blade twisting. I locked eyes with Stanton. Check the logs. Look for my credentials. Marcus tapped rapidly. Here, at 14:03 hours, an override with your biometric signature, but the secondary key wasn't used. Someone spoofed your biometrics. Fear coiled in my stomach. My fingerprint, my iris scan. They'd been cloned. The Marlowe Initiative's contingency was now a vulnerability. Stanton's voice was fierce. We need to seal the vault, physically, and track the breach's source. Claire arrived with a team. Within minutes, steel shutters descended inside the vault, sealing its contents. Tech specialists scrambled to trace the intrusion. Hours passed in tense silence. Then Bradford spoke. We've located the override's origin. It came from the secret chamber beneath the cathedral. My breath caught. The cathedral's labyrinthine crypts had served as hidden archives when the council was founded. No one else knew its entrances. I led the team down winding stairs into damp corridors. Candles flickered against stone walls etched with ancient symbols. At the crypt's far end stood a stone door bearing our seal. I placed my hand on the keypad. The lock disengaged silently. The door swung open. Inside, crates of data drives lay scattered. A lone figure hunched over a console, back turned. I aimed my flashlight. "Stop!" I commanded. The figure froze, then slowly rose, hands raised. Margaret Marlowe, my mother, stood before me, tears streaming, voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Celeste." My breath hitched. "Mom?" She nodded, shoulders shaking. "I learned of the initiative. I was terrified. What if you became a tyrant?" I had to protect the world from that power. I felt a storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, love, crash over me. Stanton's voice broke the moment. "Margaret, why?" She gestured to the drives. I copied the files, planned to destroy the initiative's record. Then I'd expose the council's skeletons and dismantle absolute power before it corrupted someone like you. I stepped forward, heart aching. "Mom, they're not skeletons, they're safeguards. The world needs hope, not fear." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was blinded by guilt. I'm so sorry." I exhaled slowly. "Then help me fix this." I turned to Stanton. "Lock down the crypt, transfer all data to remote servers, replace the biometric locks." Together, we worked through the night, my mother by my side, fortifying the vault, reissuing access protocols, and reclaiming trust. By dawn, the breach was contained. The data vault stood secure once more. As sunlight filtered into the crypt, I held my mother's hand. We all make mistakes. But today, we rebuilt. She nodded, voice soft. "I'm proud of you." I squeezed her hand, heart full. "And I love you." Outside, the candle's glow faded. A new day had begun, and with it, the final chapter awaited. Dawn filtered through the cathedral's stained glass windows, painting the crypt's stone walls in hues of crimson and gold. The air felt sacred, as though centuries of prayers and secrets still lingered beneath the arches. I stood beside my mother, Stanton, Claire, Bradford, and Marcus, surrounded by the hum of secure terminals and the quiet scent of incense burning in distant chambers. The breach had shaken me to my core, but the work of rebuilding trust and securing the Sentinel Council's legacy pressed on. Today I would close this chapter and step into the role my grandmother and countless guardians before me had prepared me for. I moved to the controls that managed the Council's global network, satellite uplinks, secure comms, encrypted archives. Each system had been fortified overnight. Multi-factor authentication, rotating key algorithms, quantum encryption layers. The Marlowe Initiative's record, now protected by a nested vault structure with enforced oversight, lay beyond even my own immediate reach. Margaret watched from the side, her hands folded in quiet resolve. Stanton stood at my right, a beacon of calm. Claire and Bradford flanked me, each representing a generation of guardians. Marcus's fingers hovered over the main console. I exhaled, the weight of the moment settling like prayer in my chest. Today we commemorate the resilience of truth over shadows. But more than that, we reclaim our humanity by choosing to guard against absolute power's seduction. Stanton nodded. "What's your final command, Celeste?" I paused, meeting each of their eyes. "We disable the Marlowe Initiative's unilateral override. By default, it remains in place, but accessible only through unanimous agreement of the Sentinel Council. Its existence is known, its power respected, but it will be used only if the world faces an existential threat surpassing all others." Claire entered the consensus code. Bradford recited the ancient oath recorded in my grandmother's journals. Margaret recited her own promise to serve as a living witness, guarding the integrity of the council. Stanton entered the final key. Marcus initiated the code sequence. The console's display shifted from active override to inactive, consensus locked. A soft chime echoed through the crypt. I exhaled, relief blooming. It is done. Outside, the sunlight intensified, dispelling the shadows that clung to the crypt's corners. I stepped forward, voice echoing. Let this place be both monument and reminder that power, unchallenged, corrupts. But when shared responsibly, it can uplift entire worlds. We ascended the stairs to the cathedral's nave. The world outside awaited. Crises to solve, truths to protect, lives to uplift. The Sentinel Council's future was bright, its mission unwavering. I looked at my mother, tears glistening. You were right to fear power unchecked, but I've learned that vigilance, compassion, and accountability form the true guard against tyranny. She smiled softly. Your grandmother would be proud. I turned to Stanton. Thank you for believing in me. She placed a hand on my shoulder. You've done more than believe. You've built something lasting. Claire grinned. And the story continues. I inhaled deeply, vision clear. The Sentinel Council's outreach to new generations, multimedia storytelling to inspire, global chapters expanding in every corner. The legacy was alive. I raised my voice to the vaulted ceiling. May the Guardian's light never wane, and may every shadow find its reckoning. Across the cathedral, our voices joined in a chorus of hope and determination. As I stepped out into the morning sun, the world felt reborn, with every city street, every silent valley, every heart in need of a guardian. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.